Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Pops.
And this is our college football episode. I know that we've been primarily, and by primarily, I mean we've only done purely NFL for the past few weeks. This is going to be our college episode. We'll recap a lot of things that have happened this offseason, take a look at sort of what's going on. Not really our predictions into college, but more of a, for those of you who tuned in this week or this past week, we had a rant with me and Maul. We'll get into a rant with me and Pops, more about college football, but we're going to bring it back to the basics of guess the player, past and present. So, Pops, I'll give it to you. Do you want the past or do you want the present first?
Let's go present.
Present. Where did Ramondre Stevenson go to school?
Oh, you brought this up because you just got paid too, didn't you?
Yeah,
I'm gonna need a conference because I didn't know this dude out of college.
This is a big hint because it's now a different conference. It's now the SEC. So you got two schools to pick from.
He didn't go to Texas. Was he an Oklahoma guy?
It was an Oklahoma guy. I honestly, looking it up, I didn't know that. I would have said, I don't know. Like, I think my mind goes to like P. Ryan and Mixon and those guys in the league right now from Oklahoma. I don't know why Ramondre gets lost in my mind from that standpoint.
Well, did Ramondre, was he the team after Baker or was he with Baker and Joe Mixon and those guys?
He came out in 2021. So it would have been, a little after. I mean, he probably was a freshman at the time with Kyler. But yeah, I think if anything, he may have been a red shirt with Baker. I have to do a little bit more digging. But yeah, your one hint was a pretty key one because they just moved conferences.
Yeah, I know.
All right, pass.
Texas.
Pass. Played for Arkansas, then played for the Raiders, and then the Cowboys.
Darren McFadden.
Yeah, dude, great pull. I was trying to, with us being a college episode, I wanted to like take it back to a dude that was just like he was a stud in college. Yeah. Animal. It was just he got hurt. I think he falls into that category, like Michael Bush does from Louisville, and a lot of running backs in college seem to, especially towards the end of their college career, you just have that randomness of an injury that you can't overcome.
Well, it's just like the guy that you mentioned on the Rant episode this week was, Toby Gerhardt. Gerhardt. Like before C-Mac, like that dude was a stud. And then it's like, what happened to this guy?
I mean, Minnesota, which I'm about to go on a rant on Minnesota. They try to change him, like make him put on a ton of weight, make him into a fullback. I mean, I sent you and Maul the video of J.J. McCarthy spiking that baseball into the backstop, completely missing. And someone was like, no surprise, J.J. McCarthy starts out 0-1 on this season. So, I mean, we had Michigan winning it all, and then sort of the bigger news that happened immediately following that we really haven't discussed was Coach Saban retiring from college football. Regardless of how you feel about Alabama, I think that for anyone that just you look at from the standpoint of national championships, he has to be either the greatest college football coach of all time, or you have to at least lump him in with one of the greatest. I think most people would put him with the greatest, just with the ability. You look at 6 at Alabama, 1 at LSU. He's had success at pretty much every program he's ever been at, minus the Dolphins. But that's a different story for a different day.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is like if he would have got Drew Brees over Dante Culpepper, he might have been in the NFL and never gone to Alabama, So if it probably worked out for his best interest that happened.
Which a lot of people have, I know me and Maul, the thing I immediately go back to is I think that if Tim Tebow doesn't go to Alabama, goes to Florida, Nick Saban never happens. They don't fire Shula. They don't try to find a new coach to get into recruiting. There's so many like things that like spawned that one instant in time that sort of changed college football in the landscape, but now he's gone. Like, and I will give Nike props. They put out a pretty good ad, which was, just a picture of Saban. It was like, college football hasn't slept this well in decades, which is true in terms of, I think that's a guy who Alabama will not be the same. Like, I'm not saying they won't be good, but from the standpoint of, up until 2 years ago when they lost to A&M on a field goal, that was the first time in like 120 games that they had lost to an unranked team. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different statistics that you can pull from Saban outside of national championships where Alabama's been really, really dominant in the sport. I don't see that continuing. Do I think that they have the ability to win games and to possibly compete for a national championship? Absolutely. Why? 12-team playoff. Like, it is a Joker's Wild type of scenario. And now that the SEC doesn't have a division anymore, with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma that we brought up earlier, with them coming in, they are now going to transition into sort of the Big Ten regime of, yes, you're going to have teams play one another, but it's really who has the best record amongst the conference at the end of the season. It's not based upon divisional status anymore, which I think will benefit the SEC and the Big Ten going forward. But what was your sort of reaction on Saban stepping down?
I think we saw the writing on the wall. I didn't think it'd be that sudden. Like as soon as the game's over, I'm done. Like that was, hey, you know what? More props to him, like ripping the Band-Aid right off, like let's get this thing started. But man, I just go back and it's how we talked about losing all the quarterbacks, the Mannings, the Breeze, the Rivers, the Brady. Like we saw our generation of quarterbacks leaving, and now we're seeing, Belichick can't find a job, which I don't think he's going to stay out of a job, but like who knows? Maybe the best he'll get is like a front office analyst or something like, some senior position in the front office, and he may never be on the sidelines again. And so it's, again, seeing a generation of greatness for our generation just leaving and letting these new guys take over. Now, honestly, I do not want to be Kalen DeBoer. That dude, I mean, kudos to him taking that job and being willing to step into that role. But my goodness, that guy's going to have a tremendous weight on his shoulders that if he doesn't perform, like in Alabama, that's the worst part, is that Alabama, either you hope they're that stacked with NIL that they can get the players, but it's also in the same boat of what if DeBoer doesn't succeed? Like, are we going to go through this 5-year period where Alabama is, getting 4 losses a season? Like, at what point do they let that go? And, what are they going to expect out of DeBoer? And I think it's going to be too much, in my personal opinion, because of who he's stepping in for.
I think Alabama needs to take a page from every other team in the SEC when it came to chasing Saban, which is if you sit back, and that's why I just sit back at the beginning of the episode and say, you can either say he's the greatest or one of the greatest. I think most people would say he's the greatest, especially at Alabama. If you sit back and you say he's the greatest head football coach of all time, the likelihood that you then hired the next greatest football head coach of all time is slim to none. Yeah. Like, I know that, I'm not sure if we talked about on the podcast. I was planning on doing an episode when he retired, and I pulled back on it just because it was mainly me sitting back talking about a lot of like different statistics. And I was like, man, people are going to go to sleep on this one. But it's like there's only been 2 teams that when you take a look at the coach that they immediately hired, there's only been 2 teams that have hired 3 consecutive coaches that have won a national championship. Miami did it. The last one was LSU. LSU had Saban, then Les Miles, then Ed Orgeron. Now Brian Kelly's sort of in the mix. But in terms of someone who won multiple national championships being replaced by someone else, so you have to go all the way back to Nebraska. Nebraska had 2 national championships, and then they hired Tom Osborne, who won 3. But this is back, before the BCS, before we even it was voted on by the AP poll. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Nebraska when I say that, But I would say that, compared to now having to go through a 12-team playoff to get to a national championship, and you look at all the different steps on how college football has just changed since the 90s, I would argue if DeBoer wins one, then they should sit back and go, thank God. Like, it's tough. Like, I mean, think about the coaches right now just in the SEC. Like, outside of Saban and Kirby, no other coach has won one. Even Brian Kelly sitting there at LSU. Like, he's been to one. He's a 1-1. Like, he's had good teams at Notre Dame and had a good team at Cincinnati that got him hired. But at no point was he the guy that you were sitting back like, oh man, he's going to compete with Saban. It was never really like competing with Saban. It was just trying to knock him off the pedestal to keep him from winning another one.
For
like
sure.
That was it. Which, I mean, I think that we can go into this now, I guess, since it's a rant. It's like a two-sided coin. You got NIL on one side, and then you have, I think there's this like seismic shift going on in college football, which is we want to refer to it as like a super conference or super conferences. I think it eventually is going to become a super conference. Like, at the end of the day, there are the teams who are competing for a CFP and there are those who are not. And from that standpoint, you look at just look at the SEC. Like, you have Texas, you have Oklahoma, you have Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee. You have big name programs. And then, I mean, not that I know one of our buddies listens to the show. You got Mississippi State and you got Vanderbilt. Like, and I'm not trying to dog Mississippi State. At one point, they did under Prescott have a number one team, and maybe that's a little bit too much shade to throw at Mississippi State, but I can throw it at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's never been close.
Checks.
And you look at them from the standpoint of like being in the SEC, and it's like, child, please, you've never even played for an SEC championship. Like, kick rocks. Like, why? I just don't see a world in which, with NIL changing the way that it has, and let's just I guess I can just open up this can of worms. So for those of you who don't know, NIL, the NCAA lost a case, and not just like a case in the media, a case in the court of law that ruled that with antitrust regulations, schools can now pay their students the revenue from ads, from marketing. Every single year the college football playoff makes a couple $1 billion, and they split that amongst the 4 schools previously who got in. Now, with that lawsuit being done, players have a right to that money. And so schools are able to give up to $20 million to their players. And that's across all sports. I'm going to argue that that's really going to be across 2, which is football and men's basketball. Like, don't get me wrong. I think there are schools that are going to have teams, women, that play look at Oklahoma with their softball team. They've won 3 or 4 straight now.
4.
Yeah.
South Carolina girls basketball. Yeah.
Exactly. There are schools out there who have the attention. LSU's women basketball team, like, they're very good. Those type of schools are going to see some type of revenue from getting into the tournament. But from the standpoint of like, the game has changed. Like, the idea of like, it's why Reggie Bush got his Heisman back. Like, even the NCAA and the Heisman Trust were like, hey, we have nothing to stand on anymore. So I look at it from that standpoint. The NCAA is no longer going to challenge transfers because it was getting tied up in the court case, which I know you like golf, and anyone who listens to golf, like, a prime example of this is LIV and PGA. Like, LIV had trillions of dollars to back themselves, and so they kept taking the PGA to court, and finally the PGA just folded because the PGA is like, hey, we don't have an unlimited amount of money to keep going to court. We're going to keep losing millions and millions and millions. We can't keep this up, so you win. And that's exactly what happened when the NCAA versus the players. Is lawsuit after lawsuit kept coming. The NCAA is like, hey, we're going to run out of money. So enough. do you think that the changes in NIL have hurt college football? I know that it's a little early to see. Like, what's the pros and the negatives that you're seeing right now?
Man, so I go back, I was never a college athlete, but I was around college athletes back, in the 2011 through 15 time frame when I was in college. And they still got stipends back then, call it what you want, but like they were healthy. They were a couple of $1,000s a month on top of room and board. Like in my mind, I'm like, y'all are rich, like y'all are making more than I am, on my cadet stipend. You guys are doing just fine. But like where it goes now, I honestly stand with what Saban said on his when he went to Washington D.C. Like when he testified, like I stand by that. Like you have lost the integrity of the game in some regards. Like I'm not going to go full blown, but like in some regards, the integrity of the game for at the college level has been lost because guys just care about getting paid now. Which I mean, it's good for them, especially the guys who aren't going to go to the pros. But let's be honest, the guys who aren't going to go to the pros also aren't the ones who are going to make that much from NIL money. But in that same regard, being a capitalist mindset, you're like, hey, I'm gonna take all the sponsors, all the deals that I can get from all these local car dealerships, steakhouses, whatever, in call it Austin, if they go to UT, like I'm gonna try to get everything I can and put as much money in my bank account, before I leave college because I know I'm not going pro. So there is some upside to it from a player perspective, but I think overall, as a whole, it is bad for the game, in my opinion.
And I think that I know exactly what you're referring to with Texas. Like, I found it funny that Sarkisian came out and was like, "Oh, you should never go to school based upon who's offering you the most money." But then on kids on recruiting visits or walking past, I'm sure you saw that video of like 7 Lamborghinis with suicide doors up, and I'm like, and this is why I say I really think that will it get out of hand? I think it's already out of hand in terms of what I mean by out of hand is it's an unsustainable model. Like for the student athletes are the ones right now like living in this like just amazing time. It's like think about it with Alabama's tackle, Caden Proctor. Saban retires. He's like, I'm going to transfer to Iowa.
I'm going to Iowa.
Yeah, goes to Iowa, gets $100,000 from their NIL fund, and you know where he's playing this year? Alabama. He's back at Alabama. Like, and you know how much money he owed Iowa? Zero. He got to keep every last penny of it. From his standpoint, like I look at for Caden Proctor, and I'm like, great job, man. Like you took the system and made it work for you.
Yeah, you found the loophole.
Hats off to you. Yeah. Like, because you don't know, like he could easily, blow out his leg this year, hurt himself, like neck injury. There's so many different things that could happen over the course of your college career that now that money that you thought you were going to get in the pros never existed. Like, and that sucks. And I understand that. So I think that guys right now are benefiting from that. But in the standpoint of like, where does that money come from with NIL deals? It's from boosters and donors. Guess what? Like Texas A&M to me is a prime example. They go out, they get the number one recruiting class, and what happens? They lose to Appalachian State. They don't even make a bowl game. Like they spent millions of dollars to pull the number one class in. And what happened? It blew up. All those kids left, and they left with their pockets full. They transferred. They'd gotten their money. They don't care anymore because it was never about playing for A&M. It was about playing for that check. What's the difference between college and pros? Is both are playing for money. Like it's just the pros have it regulated, and they do a really good job of it. It's like here's the cap. Here's what money you can spend. Here's what money you can't spend. If you want to go on your own and, have advertisements, work with dealerships, do whatever you want, go for it. Like you have an agent. That's what I think it's going to in college. But in order to get there, and I've said this for a while now, I really think that college football becomes its own thing. Like it separates itself from the NCAA it's just like a CFP, which I think does away with like your Vanderbilts and other schools. Like, I think, yeah, Mississippi State will still be in it, but in terms of like, it's going to separate teams that it's like, do you have any ability to compete at the college level for a national championship? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, from a money perspective, can you put money into the program? Can you pay kids? Can you afford to split revenue? Yes or no? No. See ya. Like,
Yeah,
and it may become like the. Go ahead.
And that was going to be the angle that I was going to work at too. Is like at some point, these little small schools are going to start running out of money, and it's just not even going to be feasible for them to even be in the league anymore. So you're going to start seeing more programs like UAB crumble because they just can't afford it anymore.
100%. Like, I don't see a way that schools. Ohio State's another example this year. Like, I put it on the Bad News Mondays. You know what Ryan Day's record is versus top 5? Yeah, dude. Like, losing a Harbaugh multiple years. Like, they can't win the Big Ten. Yeah, and they've struggled in the CFP era post Urban Meyer. Like, Urban got them one, but then outside of that, Ohio. And what's nuts is I sent you guys that graph.
I love it.
Let me pull that up because dude, that was. I had not seen that before, and that I had to like go fact check that because I was like, there is no way that for as much hype as they get.
So Tressel got one, Urban got one. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So in what we're talking about, teams with 3 or more national championships in the last 50 seasons of college football. So with 3 titles, you have Clemson, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, LSU, and Nebraska. 4 titles, you have Oklahoma and USC. 5 titles, you have Miami, the U, and then with 9, you've got Alabama. Now I sit back and look at that and I go, man, it's crazy sort of seeing those are still in the mainstay schools, but the big one that's missing out, like, where's Ohio State?
Every year.
Up there.
Yeah, and every year is like they're number one. What? How does that even make sense? Yeah.
Another school, Notre Dame, they're not on there. Michigan got 1, but they haven't won in forever. Mm-hmm. So they now, I think, have 2 in the past 50 years with the 1997 championship before the BCS era began. Penn State, they're not up there. Like, it really opens your eyes to, like, when you think about the last 50 years, just in terms of when you add up these, you got 9 from Alabama, 5 from Miami, that's 14. Oklahoma and USC combined for another 8, so that's 22. And then you got 6 teams with 3, that's another 18. So where are we at? We're at bad with public math. Like 36. So 36 out of the past 50 years has only been won by a total of 10 schools? Like that's more of a huge like highlight to the disparity, I think, within college football in terms of the top versus the bottom of just sort of playing. But from the standpoint of like where I think it goes, big things are going to happen in recruiting. I think that you're going to have a lot more of the like allegations of tampering. And I think that what you're going to start to see is like this idea of like some booster being like, I mean, Ohio State came out and said, I was sort of shocked, and Saban brought it up that like Ohio State had kids, they were like, you want me to come on a visit? It's $5,000.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. That blows my mind. Like, maybe I just wasn't, I wasn't, anything special in terms of a high school prospect, but that takes some balls to just sit back and be like, hey, one of the premier schools in the country, you want me to come visit? It's going to be $5,000 for me to show up. That blows my mind sitting back thinking about, which I think, to your point, that's a huge negative within the sport. Like, how do you handle that? Mm-hmm. There's no solution right now on the table to handle that. There's nothing to handle transfers. There's not like college football is sort of a free for all right now, and I think that that's gonna it will benefit the players in this time period, but then future guys, it's going to be like, I don't care that you're the number one guy. We've had the number one guy for the past 5 years that we've paid money to. You know what we have to show for it? 0 national titles. Yeah. You're not getting anything. Like, and I think you can. I know you're a Texas fan. Texas has the richest donor club in the country. Like, Texas has money, but that money, like, is not going to be consistently given out year after year after year with no results. Like, it gets coaches fired. That's why Charlie Strong got fired.
Well, because boosters Tom Herman hated him. Yeah. Same with Tom Herman. Yeah. You know, that you get all that, you know, all the hype about being, you know, part of Texas's program, which honestly it's because it's been around as, you know, one of the longest tenured, you know, programs in the history of college football. So that's why it's always been such a, you know, predominant program. But it's like, what have we done the last, you know, couple of decades? Like, all we've got is, you know, a little bit of Vince Young, and Colt McCoy had some success. But like outside of that, you know, this last couple of seasons has been really the only time that Texas has been on the verge of coming back, as some would say. But even Sark, you know, struggled in his first year. But yeah, like, it all comes down to, you know, the boosters eventually are going to get tired of paying. We've got this old crusty sim guy. I still remember I was talking to him last year during the season. You know, A&M was already off to a bad start, and he's like, "Yeah, we're going to come back. You know, this team, we got too good of players to be playing like this, and you know, we're still going to find our way into the CFP." And I was just like, "All right, old man, like, you're delusional," which, I mean, it showed by you falling asleep while I'm flying a simulator. But you know, like, it's just crazy how many people put their time, their money into the program, like, and see nothing for it. You know, it's like, it's almost like gambling. You know, that's what it's turning into. Is like, I'm pushing my money back to the school. I mean, a lot of these guys can probably write it off on taxes somehow, some way, but they're like, hey, I'm pushing money to this school. I want to see some investment. And when it turns on them, that's when they get pissed off and, you know, try to make that regime change. And it's never going to change. Just like you said, like, that was part of what Saban said, was these guys wanted me to tell them how much I was going to pay them. I don't want to pay you until you show me you can play. You know, and like, the fact that you had to do that in every single negotiation with a kid, like, I would get tired of that crap too. I was like, look, kid, I understand this is the new way of the game, but you have not shown me anything besides film that you can play college football. And, you know, we've been the top team, you know, before we were playing people or paying people. It's still going to be a dominant school. You know, you got to show yourself before I'm willing to just hand you, you know, $200,000 a season.
And I think that, you know, you look at Texas, you look at Ohio State, Michigan, sort of the USC, Alabama. Do they have money to pay kids? Yes. But this is sort of where that disparity starts to come in. Like, you really start, and Saban's warned about this. And I always got sort of tickled when he was a coach. People were always like, Saban's complaining again because he's not winning. And it was not that Saban was complaining because he wasn't winning. It was like, hey, I'm going to win at this, and you're not going to like it. Like, when all these schools can recruit all the best players because other schools can't compete financially with it, like, that creates a disparity. That's like what's the beautiful thing about the NFL. Now, like, in one sense, yes, you have teams that, you know, will go out and find guys and pay other teams, and then you have teams like the Cowboys that all they can do is sign backup running backs. Like, little shots at the Cowboys since we're on the college football episode, re-signing Zeke. But I look at it from the standpoint of, this is why I just sit back and go, the model is going to have to change to make it equal. Like, it's for the betterment of the sport. Like, if you want people to keep watching and you want people to sit back and go, hey, I enjoy this sport, it has to have some disparity to it. Don't get me wrong, like, Alabama, you're going to have teams that go on dominant runs, but from the standpoint of, like, opening it up to sit back and go, hey, every team has a chance, you have to put caps on things. You have to be able to regulate it more. That's just sort of what I see going from college football. Now, Maul asked me this question on the rant, and I'll give it to you. With Saban gone, do you think that another program is going to stand up and sort of, I don't want to say be as dominant. You can say they may be as dominant, but will sort of be that the next, the 2020s of who's the team that we're going to walk out remembering from the 2020s as being the dominant team?
I mean, you're going to hate me for saying this, but I think the easiest
Georgia?
Yeah, I think the easiest target is Georgia if Kirby continues his program. Like, they've got the backing, they're SEC school, big money. Like, I see them taking that step. And that's just my personal opinion. I mean, you're going to hate me for saying this, but I did like when Saban actually had somebody to duke out with every season. Like him just steamrolling guys all the way to the championship. Like, for the sake of football, that's not entertaining. Like, you get tired of seeing these guys just steamroll people. Now, I'll be honest. When we were sitting there after that flyover and we're just watching them beat the brakes off of Ole Miss, in the end zone, there's nothing better. Like, I'm a Tide fan all day, at that moment. But, like, over the span of time, it is good to see, Goliath finally having their David and, Georgia finally being able to knock a couple off, in which Alabama knocked a couple off of them. So it was good to see a program finally be able to stand up to Alabama.
The only thing that I question with Georgia, for the Georgia fans out there listening, and I think that if you're a Georgia fan, you have to admit this is a true statement, regardless if you like it or not.
Talking about Kirby
What's
leaving?
Kirby's? Well, no. It's what's Kirby's biggest struggle. It's offense. Yeah. Like, Saban did something pretty amazing when you look back. Like, when you think about 09, 11, and 12, so you got them beating Texas, then them going back to back against LSU and against Notre Dame, it was running offenses. Like, yes, they had AJ McCarron, but it was really predicated on like Trent Richardson, Mark Ingram, Eddie Lacy. Like, we're going to run downhill. We're going to beat you with a suffocating defense. And it wasn't really until Alabama played Clemson with Deshaun Watson that was like, hey, college football is changing. Like, it is, you need a mobile quarterback, because mobile quarterback just prevents this like a whole nother scheme that most college teams can't really defend against. We're going to spread you out 4 or 5 wide receiver set. We're going to throw it up, because let's be real. You may have one good corner on the team, but the rest are just a pass interference away from like giving you the game. So Saban changed. Saban recruited differently, made that switch. That's the biggest thing that I haven't seen with Georgia, is like Georgia is still a run first team. Like, even with Carson Beck, the closest they got to it was with Justin Fields, and they were like, nope, we're going to keep Jake Fromm. And he was like, well, see, I'm going to Ohio State. Like, and I really believe that if Kirby had not beaten Saban that year, there was probably going to be more calls for his head. Yeah. Now, they went back to back, and I think he's safe for a while. But the door is for sure open for Georgia to be dominant. The question is like, how do they affect recruiting now that Texas and Oklahoma is in? And I'll be real honest with you. I think Oklahoma is going to be trash.
No, I agree.
Like, I don't see Oklahoma. I like Venable, and I think that Oklahoma will they'll have a good team in terms of they won't be the bottom rung of the SEC. But let's be honest. Who wants to go to Oklahoma? Like, Oklahoma's in the middle of nowhere, and it's in Oklahoma. That's why I say it. Oklahoma's in the middle of nowhere. I'd never forget, I had a commander one time that was from Oklahoma, and I landed in the airport. It was like, come see Oklahoma. And I sent a picture to him. I go, see what? Like, wind turbines? Like, there's nothing out here. Texas, on the other hand, has money. Like, and Texas is, they're in a great location. Like, there is money to be made by going to Texas. That will be the biggest push for Kirby initially. in my opinion. It will be, I just don't know who in the SEC outside of LSU and Texas that is possibly going to challenge Georgia up front, because the only coach that Kirby ever struggled with was Saban. Yes, he beat him in the national championship, but he was 1-5. Like, people forget that the next after that natty last year was, lost in the SEC before the natty. And then last year lost in the SEC championship again when they were trying to three-peat. Like, that's a huge relief from Kirby. What you got Georgia in the SEC. Who's your team in the Big Ten? Do you think that any of the newcomers with USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA are going to make a difference in the Big Ten and possibly compete? Or do you think it's either Michigan or Ohio State that are going to take home the crown again?
I think really the only other team that we could talk about, is James Franklin out Penn State. Like, I feel like those are the only three teams that are talked about routinely year after year after year, but it ended up being, Michigan took over, then it was Ohio State, and Penn State was just the one trying to fake it till they made it, type team. And I really don't see, we saw Lincoln Riley have such a powerful offense with Baker and Kyler just slinging it around, and they weren't able to reproduce that with Spencer Rattler. Caleb, obviously, he won a Heisman, yes, but like they at least had some sort of defense at Oklahoma that he just hasn't been able to recruit to USC, which I see as a huge problem, as him getting close to being on the hot seat, going 500 the last 2 years and not really making a mark for leaving Oklahoma to go out there. So personally, I think there's a lot of questions about what's Moore's first name at Michigan? Rashawn? No, not Rashawn. Richard? Is it Richard? The new coach.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, the new coach that just took over at Michigan. Obviously, he's got a lot of shoes to fill, but he stepped in and crushed it for the first 5 games of last season, when Harbaugh was suspended. So he's got the experience. He learned under Harbaugh for the last 7 years. I'll be quite interested to see. I think really what we could see happening this year is Ryan Day. It will finally get fired, especially if they lose to the new coach at Michigan. There's no way Ryan Day will survive that.
It is Sherrone Moore. I agree with you that if they stumble against Michigan again, it costs them a chance at a CFP. Ryan Day's done.
Well, at least they'll be in it because it's a 12 team this year.
Possibly. There's a very high likely chance that what you just said is 100% correct. That
I just want to know how a 3-loss Ohio State can still be in the top 10. Like, please make it make sense.
They'll find a way.
Exactly.
They'll find a way.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, they're going to be there.
Well, that's what kills me is I know I'm not sure if you were on it yet when we talked about it. Like, I know me and Maul harped so much last season about just sort of the inconsistencies with the CFP committee. And I look at it and go, 12 teams isn't going to change anything. In fact, I think it's going to make it far worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it was really only about like one specific team of whether they should be number 4 or should be number 5. But now you're going to open up this bucket where it's like, maybe you do have a Cincinnati that's undefeated. Maybe now the crazy thing is it's the top 4, the number 4 teams, 1 through 4, are not what the CFP say they are. It is based upon who is the highest 4 seeds that are conference champions. Those get the number 4. Because like a few years ago when USC lost to Tulane, if it had been a 12-team playoff, Tulane would have been the number 4 seed in the playoffs. Now, I will give Maul, I know he's not here, but he always says this. He's like, it gives them a chance. Like, at least they have the ability to be a Boise State and shock everyone. Is it likely? No. But is there a chance? Yes. And that's far better than being left out and have 0 chance.
Yeah, you best believe.
But from the
I'm trying that Statue of Liberty.
Oh my gosh. What a I will never forget that.
How did you stumble on Kellen Moore? That's what I want to know. Boise State quarterback.
Well, it's Kellen Moore. Well, it wasn't Kellen Moore that game. It was Zabransky. Zabransky was the guy that, because I just remember he's like, Zabransky's legs are going to be critical. And then the hook and lateral. Oh my gosh, do you believe it? And that's when my dad came.
Yeah, and then followed up with the Statue of Liberty.
And
you remember that?
What's nuts? Yes, I remember the Statue of Liberty. What's nuts is that I feel like the play before that led to the Statue of Liberty is one of the ones that doesn't even get talked about, which is on a 4th down. They let their halfback throw for a touchdown to a tight end. Like, it's just Oklahoma. You could, once they got into overtime, you could tell Oklahoma was like, that was it's over. Like, it's over. If they score, they're going for 2. So, and then it's great game. What a great! I can watch that game any day of the week. Like, if I turned on the TV right now and that game was on, I'm staying up till 2:00 in the morning to finish that game because it's a great game. I will say I hate the idea of Penn State, like, mainly because Penn State has never found a quarterback. Like, the last good quarterback to come out of Penn State, in my opinion. Now I get that this is based upon pro accolades, was Kerry Collins. Like, outside of that, you gonna say Trace McSorley or somebody like, or Hackenberg? Like, no. Like, Penn State has had huge struggles with finding a quarterback. Dude, I watched Ohio State's. I was in Columbus, Ohio on a layover and watched their spring game. Dude, their quarterback, hot trash. Dude, he was missing guys all over. Like, it was, and even you could hear Ohio State fans, like, just being in Columbus that day, that you could tell that they were just like, dude, this is not good. Like, and it's tough. Like, I sit back and I look at what, like, go ahead.
Yeah, I take it back to last season. You know, like Kyle McCord. They're just like, he's our guy, and everybody's trying to boo him out of the stadium. And like, it just showed Ryan Day had nobody else.
Which I think that's sort of a bigger topic within college football. Like, I know Brady has talked about it, like, in terms of the pros, but what leads from the pros, college, like, that's the farm. Quarterback plays terrible. Like, for the vast part, like, you look at Caleb Williams was really the only answer. Don't get me wrong, Jaden Daniels, yes, he won the Heisman. He had some good moments. I still don't think anyone was sitting back going, man, Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in college football. Mm-hmm. No, they would have said Caleb Williams best quarterback in college football. Like, that's why he went number 1 in the draft. Like,
that almost got me kicked out of an Uber, by the way. I just want to let you know that. We were leaving New Orleans, and I was like, Jaden Daniels ain't that good. I thought the guy was literally going to kick me out of the Uber.
Thank you for standing your ground.
He's like,
sorry, he got voted in for sympathy.
Don't talk about my quarterback.
Yeah, well, your quarterback, you know, he had some good wide receivers around him.
Well, and he's only been in college for 8 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he threw a touchdown pass to Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk's trying to negotiate a contract with the 49ers right now.
Like against Herbert.
Against Herbert. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I sit back and I look at it, the Big Ten. I don't think it's any of the former Pac-12 schools. What I do see is I think that a team like Wisconsin could be not saying that they're going to compete for a national championship, but could very easily derail someone else. Like,
that upset team.
Mainly, yeah, just because I don't think the quarterback play in the Big Ten this year is going to be exceptional by any means. Like, a lot of people have said that really the SEC sort of holds the keys with quarterback in terms of the guys out there. You get Quentin Ewers with Texas. You've got Carson Beck with Georgia, Jalen Milroe at Alabama. You look at the Big Ten, like Michigan is having a backup come in. Ohio State transfer from Kansas State, of which, I watched them fumble the bag against Texas last year with one of the worst throws I've ever seen in my entire life from a quarterback, on a 4th down play that you sit back and you go, oh my goodness. Like, Penn State, as I've already pointed to, they've got 50 years of having feels like a terrible quarterback play. If a team can just find a kid, like another team that I think is has a chance to be up and coming, Nebraska. Like, which is, I also say it's sort of tongue in cheek because you've already hit the floor. Like, you've some way found a way to dynamite through the floor to get down even lower. Nebraska has a higher ceiling than anyone else. They got the new kid that was the 5-star that was committed to Georgia, but his dad's on the staff at Nebraska and graduated from Nebraska, who went there. Nebraska has a chance to, I think, surprise some teams. And this is a great year to do it because I think that a lot of teams are just going to be not as dominant as people think they could be, which I think opens the door, like you said, for Georgia.
And I mean, look at Matt Rule's resume before he got to the NFL. Like, I understand he was handed the worst franchise in the NFL. So you really can't doubt him, or you can't, get down on him that much. But like, if you look at his college resume from, Temple to Baylor, the things that he was able to do, the success that he had before leaving, like, I mean, this dude, he knows football, and he brought in Belichick earlier this season, to sit down with all the coaches and just talk football. He was on some podcast. I guess Belichick was talking to him for like 6 hours, no piss breaks. And so they're all just like sitting there, just like, what do we do? Like, and Belichick's just going, and like, I think Rule's trying to change the the mentality over there at Nebraska to try to make them good again. Just like, what was his name? Frost? Was that their last coach? Scott Frost? What he tried to do.
The fake national title claimer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm honestly, I think the biggest question mark that I have is, what's Colorado going to do? Like, they've been quiet this offseason besides all the drama with, transfers leaving and saying, oh, this program sucks, yada, yada, yada. But, like, I'm real curious to see how Shedeur does another year after big-time ball.
I think Colorado, it's nuts because I said on the podcast, I'm sure you heard it, when Maul asked me that question, I said, wherever Deion goes. The biggest issue, I think, with Colorado is money. Like, they don't have a budget like Texas or anybody else to compete. They have Deion, and they sort of have that swag factor that helps kids. But I'm sorry, like, as cool as those glasses are, and as cool as like Deion is and everything else, like, if Deion's offering you $10K and Texas is Oakland offering you $100,000, it's like, where are you gonna go? You're gonna go to Texas. Like, money talks. Old AC/DC song. Like, it's true. Like, I can see Colorado doing okay in the big, I guess we're calling it the Big 12 again this year.
Big 12, yeah.
But from the standpoint of, do I think that Colorado will find the success that they're hoping to find? No. Like, for me, it's the best play on the team's not Shedeur.
No, it's Travis.
Dude, Travis Hunter, in my opinion, last year was the Heisman winner.
Oh, for sure.
And I think he's the number one guy going into this season. Like, the dude is by far the best corner in college football this coming season.
Until he punctured his
and
lung.
He plays,
until he punctured that lung. Or what? He broke his ribs and whatever else. Yeah.
Well, it was that kid in that game, I think it was against Colorado State, that took that cheap shot and put him out. And that really cost him, in my opinion, a chance at Heisman, because he was playing close to 180 snaps a game. And it wasn't like for show. He was picking off passes on defense. Yeah. He was making a difference. From the Big 12, you look at it and you go, it's almost like, all the misfit toys. It's just which one gets pushed to the top. I don't really feel like anyone rises to the top. It's just who survives, and comes out.
I don't know. You know who I think that conference is going to become now?
Like Mountain West?
It's going to be the new Mountain West. Like, nobody's going to watch it anymore.
Same with it's sort of the Big East before the Big East came apart. I mean, the ACC's in the same boat. Like, I know we've talked a little bit about it. Like, Clemson was suing or not Clemson, Florida State suing and Clemson joined them, suing the ACC to say, hey, these fees that you're putting on us to leave, that's illegal, antitrust suits, all this different stuff. It's getting caught up in the courts right now. I think the writing's on the wall that the ACC is going to come apart.
Oh, it's falling apart. Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Well, and like, let's be honest. Like, you've only had the last couple of years. Like, Duke was like enough to make some noise. You know, North Carolina had Mac Brown making a little bit of noise. You know, with some good prospects. But like, it's been Florida State and Clemson. You know, for the last 20 years. You know, and even into the 90s with Bowden. You know, and it's just like there's never been a good ACC football team outside of those two programs. And I mean, I don't blame them for wanting to leave. The only caveat is, you know, their basketball programs, which they really don't have basketball programs. But, you know, the ACC is known for basketball, not football. So I don't blame Clemson and Florida State for wanting to get out, in my opinion.
I will stand on this until my dying day. The only reason we talked about Duke last year was because Clemson, no one wanted to say that Clemson was ugly. Like, when Duke beat Clemson, people were like, oh man, maybe Duke's good. Instead of being like, dude, Clemson's trash. Like, that was the whole thing last year is Clemson was not a good football team. They struggled in all facets of the game. Then you have Florida State, who, yes, went undefeated, lost their quarterback, looked terrible against, you know, I think it was Louisville. I know for sure that they ended up playing the ACC championship, didn't look good. And I forget the other two teams that they played. And then they just got murdered. Absolute break speed off them by Georgia, which it didn't help that half of their team was like, yep, we're done. Yep. We're going pro. The ACC, I think that when you see it break up, it's going to be enveloped. There are going to be teams that get pulled out that go to the Big Ten, to the SEC. But then, just like you said, then the rest, it's like, well, the Big 12 is going to be like, well, do you want to play with us? Because we're feeling sort of left out because no one wants anybody else in this conference. Like, exactly. It's why Oregon State doesn't have a. I mean, them and I forget who the other team is. I think it's Arizona State are the only two teams left in the Pac-12. I forget who the other team is. I'm gonna look that up. But who?
No, it was
outside of
it was Wazoo, wasn't it?
It is Wazoo.
Yeah, yep. Washington State.
So you sit back and look at that, and you go, I don't. It's a very similar situation. It's one of these ones where the coffin has already been lowered into the ground. No one's thrown dirt on it yet. Like they're dead. It's not changing anything. So, I guess that's my question. That's a good little segue. Outside of the SEC and Big Ten, who's the schools that you look at this coming season that you go, they present the biggest challenge going forward?
I mean, I look at who played in the Big 12 championship last year. Oklahoma State always finds a way, you know, to be there, you know.
And to lose.
Yeah, and to lose. Yeah, to get curb stomped. But, you know, somehow they're able to be gritty. Is this Gundy's last year? I
don't know.
I can't remember if he retired or if he's been talking about it, but that man's been there forever. I mean, who wouldn't want to play hard for a coach with a mullet, you know? But, dude, Oklahoma State always seems to be close to the top 25 year after year, you know, regardless. I mean, TCU, they look terrible now. You know, they sold it all to get to the national championship, then get blown out by Georgia. Looked god-awful last year. Like, that's the thing, man. It's like this NIL is just nobody's going to have the money, you know, to bring these guys in that the SEC and the Big Ten are already getting a hold of, you know, like that's just the way that I see it. And, you know, that's where I'm saying like the integrity of the game is going to start to disappear because these schools, like you've already mentioned it, these schools will not be able to compete. And so you're going to make almost a monopoly between these conferences to where it just becomes a super conference like you talked about. And only, you know, these 15, 20 teams are going to be able to play year after year, and it's essentially going to turn into a professional football league. Like that's the part that sucks, like, and we didn't even talk about, making up contracts, for these players to get them to stay. Like, you want this money, you got to sign this contract to stay. Like it's going to be interesting to see where this turns out in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Big 12. There's just no team in there. Yes, I get that TCU had the magic run 2 years ago, and then opening game lose to Colorado. Like, sorry, TCU's back to being TCU. Like, TCU every 15 years will have a really good year, but outside of that, they've consistently been TCU. Oklahoma State always, like, it never ceases to amaze me. This year, prime example, that they will find a way to win a very big game.
Yep.
And then the next week, you're like, who is this? They went out and beat Oklahoma, in Bedlam, crazy game. And then UCF proceeds to blow the brakes off. I mean, they lit that boomer wagon on fire, killed the horses, murdered all the Cowboys. I mean, it was atrocious. And I remember watching that game and was like, how in the world is the committee going to put Oklahoma State top 25? And sure enough, they did. Now it's just like, you got to be kidding me. They got absolutely murdered in this game, but we got to prop up other teams' records because now with if you made Oklahoma State look worse, it makes Oklahoma look worse. It makes Texas look worse. Like, all these dominoes continue to fall from the ACC. Like, I know people are going to say Clemson and Florida State. Florida State's funny. Who did they get at quarterback? DJ Uiagalelei from Clemson, who wasn't that great at Clemson, goes to Oregon State.
Yeah.
Now he's back at Florida State. I think Florida State's in for a rude awakening just because anytime you have so many guys leave, like I sort of expect the same out of Michigan this year. When you have guys that come back and don't go to the draft, come back for their senior year in order to win a national championship, and then they leave, it's just a huge gap. Like, a lot of those guys in the second string, really, you don't know what you got because the first stringers were so good. They've been there for 4 years. So, will they still have talent? Yeah. But in terms of being this Florida State's going to, come back and prove a point, I think Florida State loses 4 or 5 games this year. That's just my take. Miami, I get Cristobal has had some good recruiting, but Miami has been the U died a long time ago. I think it was against Florida International when they had that fight. That was the death of Miami. You haven't seen the swag, you haven't seen the U, you haven't seen great players come out since then. It's been over. So yeah, I agree with you. Outside of the SEC and the Big Ten, up until things change, it's going to be hard for me to sit back and go, yeah, one of your champions is not coming from that conference. And then it's real easy to narrow down to where I would say less than 10 teams from both of those schools, if not really less than 5, are the guys that you're like, oh, this is the team that could compete. At least the 12-team playoff, I think, makes it interesting from the standpoint of it gives teams a shot. Hey, you can throw your best punch, and hopefully, one of these teams comes out flat, doesn't come out prepared, and it's a beautiful thing because it happens in the pros and it happens in college that teams that have no business beating that other team find a way. It's great when it happens.
I'm not saying you just go back to nobody thought TCU should have been in it when they played Georgia in the Natty, but who'd they beat to get there? They beat Michigan. Everybody thought it was going to be Georgia and Michigan going into that national championship game, and then TCU ends up beating Michigan. Because Max Duggan, just doing the things that he did, just had an outstanding year. And just put that team on his back, and then they play 2 weeks later and just get the brakes beat off of them by Georgia. But yeah, man,
that was murder.
I think it will be a lot like that. You're going to have these teams, at the bottom seeds, and we're just going to see all right, these guys should not be here at all. Like we're going to see more big blowout games, I think, in my personal opinion. Maybe they put in the second string in the second half so they keep it close, for Vegas reasons. But, dude, I don't see it going well for, those lower seeded teams in these big games. Like, we might get some upsets, but it's not going to look like March Madness. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I sit back and think about it, because I can't remember if they would have been a top 4 team last year, but I know that they would have probably at least made the playoff, was Liberty. They were undefeated.
Yeah,
now they went and played Oregon, and the bowl game was just got shellacked. Yep. And you sit back and you look at it and you go, from that standpoint, like I sit back and I go, I hate to tell people, but no one wants to watch Liberty as the number 4 seed have to play someone like Alabama. Like Alabama or Ohio State sneaks in with 2 to 3 losses. Because let me tell you, talent, mano a mano, does Liberty have a chance? Yes. Is it so slim that I won't even like compare it? Correct. Like I'd probably wager my car or my truck on it. Be like, yeah, 30 grand on Alabama to at least cover and win, because this is going to be it should be murder. It should be, somehow legal murder on a football field. But that's the consequences that you get when you open this Pandora's box, which it will be interesting. I think that's like a huge under topic of how much drama the 12-team playoff is going to create, especially at the end with teams that we're looking at. Like, how are you ranking? Just like you talk about all the time, like Penn State plays no one. They'll lose to Michigan. They'll lose to Ohio State. And they'll probably sneak in as a 12 seed because they only have 2 losses. And then you start looking at their schedule and you're like, well, who do they beat? And you're like, no one. But because of the brand name they're in. So checks. I can definitely see that happening.
Well, and, I just look back, like, remember last year when Selection Sunday came around? Because everyone's like, oh, Florida State's getting in. Like, there's no way they're going to make Michigan play Alabama. And, there was just this, everybody was just waiting. They're like, oh, yeah, Florida State's got to get in, because everybody was already saying there's no way. But then just that room of the number 1 team, Michigan, just going flat as soon as they heard Alabama. Like, that energy got sucked out of that room. And I can just imagine, being that 12 seed, like, all right, like, we got to go play Georgia. We got to go play Bama. Like, whoever it may be in the future, like, that's how it's going to be for the future. And then I hope they don't continue to try to grow this, like, because at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, all it is more money. Like, that's why they're doing this. Like, there's no other reason, because we all know there may be a year where maybe a 12 seed makes it, maybe, but I don't ever see a low seed team, below 6. I don't even say below the top 6, actually winning it for, the better part of a decade.
It's why the pros have, and I know I can hear Maul sitting next to me on this couch saying this, and that's why I bring it up, like, where it's like the pros play one another. They have clear schedules, and it's about who won and who lost, and this team is in. And the playoffs are good because it does pick the best teams. Like, and there's no argument about whether or not, hey, the Bears should have got in this last year. And it's like, no, they shouldn't. You know why? Because they lost this game. Like, that's why they're not in. Those are the things that, like, make it great. And until college football, I think that, just like you talked about, why is the NFL wanting to go to 18 games in a regular season? More money. Like, it's a whole nother week of football. They're already wanting to blow it up to 14 teams in the CFP. Why? What? Money. Yeah. Like, it's more games. Like, it's more opportunities for people to pay to fly to a stadium, or for them to sell the game eventually to, like, Netflix or someone else. Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, it's the NFL's already doing it. College football, it is bound to happen. It's bound to happen that one of these games is going to be brought to you by Amazon, brought to you by Peacock, and who's the only person showing it?
Yeah, and they're already going international. I mean, Navy and Notre Dame played in Ireland last season.
Yeah, and they're doing the same this year. Like, it's changing at the times. But I'm not going to let us do 2.5 hours like BML did.
No, not a chance.
I know we've had a good discussion. It's a little bit NIL and sort of the drama within college football. I think there's as you've seen, if you listen to the episode, there's a lot of turmoil right now in college football. And it's not going to be resolved this year. I think it's going to be something that in 5 years we'll look back here and be like, ooh, these are the things that we saw that were wrong. No one fixed it. And here's these big problems that we really didn't see now, but now we're seeing. And it's like, how are they going to fix it? Like, I'm not saying in the dangerment of like losing college football is always going to happen. College football is never going away. It's more about the problems that are going to happen, like the secondary and tertiary effects from allowing stuff to enter into the sport, what happens going forward. But outside of that, you got anything else, Pops?
No, man, that was fun.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Time to pull chalks.